host, and we talk about leadership, employee engagement, employee experience, and strategic problem solving on this live cast. Well, today we have a question from one of our leaders, and she is asking, how does a CHRO of a luxurious brand influence the C suite to change its operating model, which heavily depends on its full time employees, to deliver the customer service experience for part time employees who they believe are not as committed? So essentially, the question is really about this. There's a luxury brand who believes that they need to shift, or this particular leader believes that there needs to be a shift in their operating model. And they need to bring in more part-time employees. And there are a number of benefits to that. And so we won't really go into that right now, but I will just kind of look at the question. Now, before we hop in, I want to encourage those of you who have your questions as it relates to one of those topics. Again, talent management, leadership, employee experience, employee engagement, and strategic problem solving. If you have a question regarding any of those, submit your questions, and you can do so by simply messaging me. I can also give you the link where you can actually submit your questions. You do not have to be live to have your questions answered. And so I will definitely make sure you have access to the video so that you can actually get your questions answered and perhaps share it with your leadership team if you so choose, or those who are impacted by the question that you're asking. So as we're talking about luxurious brands and how do they ensure that they have, I would say, loyalty, right? Brand loyalty with their customers, customer loyalty, based upon how they actually do things, right? So we're going to assume that your brand is really about providing this experience. And actually, the leader said they are pretty much akin to a Ritz-Carlton. So we know that to be an exclusive brand, a luxury brand. So how do you actually maintain your customer base if you're shifting operating model? So I want to ask you a couple of questions. Number one, so have you done the research to show what your employees actually think? That would be your employees as well as your customers actually think. And how do they feel about your brand? Because why they are choosing you, it could be for that, but it could be for a number of other reasons. And I say this because this person actually shared some information regarding their exact product. And so it is not a hotel products. So they're not in the hotel industry, but they actually liken themselves to a Ritz-Carlton. And so because I have not had an opportunity to really engage with your brand, I can only share with you some questions. But I do want to share with you some information based upon what I actually have. And so here's what I want you to know is that 30% of brands are already employing part-time staff. And you may say, yeah, that may be fine for a Neiman Marcus or a Nordstrom's or something like that, but not necessarily for your particular organization or company, right? Well, that's the case, and it could be the case, but I want you to think about that. A lot of companies, and especially even in the luxury industry, they had to make a shift, especially with the pandemic. And so research indicates that a shift in the workforce towards part-time employment is what a lot of organizations are going towards, or maybe it's a job share. So perhaps you do a job share with some employees who need some greater flexibility, but it's really not about the part-time employee itself, right? That's not going to be able to deliver in the same capacity as a full-time employee. And from the narrative, I believe that's what the thoughts are. I'm going to say that's not necessarily the case, right? Because there are some part-time employees who are well invested in your operating model, in your brand, in what you're actually doing. So my question for you would be, is to evaluate how are you, or I guess my statement, and I'm saying it as a question, but it would be to, really evaluate who are you recruiting into your organization. So are you recruiting the right talent? Because it can be a full-time person or a consultant who's part-time or whoever, or a part-time employee, right? And it really depends upon the person. How do they feel about your particular brand? Are you delivering what it is that they actually need to be able to fulfill their goals? Do they have any interest in what you are, what your brand is? And so that would be the first question that I would ask myself. Is not really about the part-time staff and assuming that part-time staff are not loyal or part-time staff can't deliver or they don't care, but more so looking at who are we bringing in, period, part-time, consultants, part-time, or full-time. It really doesn't matter. The question is, are they connected to our organization? Do they believe in our vision? And then acknowledge your your shortcomings rather. And so I'll understand that you're concerned about commitment, but it's essential, it's absolutely imperative to recognize that there are people who are highly skilled and motivated, and addressing those concerns should be your core strategy. A key aspect of your strategy is how do you really address those concerns? How do you get people up and running so that they are well invested in your organization and what you actually do? Are you ensuring that you're providing them with the right training, the right leadership to be able to support them, the right resources where they don't have to necessarily go and search things out all the time? So this is an opportunity for you as you're evaluating whether you guys can make that shift, is to really look at what are the supporting components that actually make it happen. And of course, one of the things you can also do is really think about how do you recognize and reward even your part-time employees. I remember when I was in college, this was years ago, and I was working at the Hilton Hotel Corporation and the Promise Hotel Corporation. And I remember while I was in college there, that there was an attention to the part-time employees. So how did they actually treat us? What do we actually receive, in terms of our schedule, or how we actually work? Do they work with our college, classes? Could we get credit for it? What bonuses could we actually get? And so I can think also about a time when I was working for a automobile company. I was in the automobile industry while I was in college. And again, both of those were two really great experiences while working part-time at very strong organizations. And they treated us with dignity and respect, and as if we were part of the team, not just that we were part-time and these benefits don't necessarily apply to you, right? And so I want you to think about what is your employee experience, and how can we actually improve our employee experience where it supports engagement of our employees, whether that's part-time or full-time or whatever, right? So what can you actually do to really get them connected? When you're talking about your target audience and you staying competitive in the luxury market, I want you to think about how can you optimize costs while maintaining the customer service that your brand is known for. And so a lot of times we don't look at optimization. We just train strategy, or we think the strategy is going to trump all of these other things. But I want you to begin to think about how we can, again, optimize. How can we streamline things? How can we ensure that they have the best experience possible? Because if I have to go looking and searching for things and I'm frustrated, will that have an impact on your particular customer? So how can they resolve problems? I'm going to give you another thing that you could actually do as well when I think about it. I'm thinking about Zappos, and I really don't know if Zappos has had full-time employees who were delivering their customer experience. While they were not a luxury brand, I will say this: I'm pretty sure they had part-time employees. And I am a person who can attest that, I was on the phone with a person years ago who worked at Zappos, and I was sharing with them something. I can't remember whatever it was at the time, but I remember them actually having the capability to send me flowers. And it's little things like that where you are empowering your talent that makes them feel like they have responsibility and they have power and authority to be able to deliver certain things. And so if you take that away, or you don't give them that resource or that tool, or make them feel as if they can make a decision and the decision actually stops with them, that could be something could have an impact as well. And so just again, think about how you can actually optimize your costs. How can you maintain the quality of customer service? What is it that you need to do differently for that to actually work? It's not that it can't work, but again, how do you problem solve this? Which brings me to my next point. So to transition successfully, I'm going to recommend that you tailor, again, your packages with benefits and flexible schedules and professional development opportunities. And think about how that approach, by doing so for your employees, can really help them to deliver. They are committed. You're investing in them. Begin to ask them, what are your dreams and what are your goals and why are you here and how are you feeling? And really include them even in things such as your voice of the employee survey. If you have a survey or a pulse survey or focus groups, are you hearing them? Are you listening to their voice? And are you taking what they actually share and you're doing something with that? You've got to be crystal clear that if you're going to make this transition, you want to have a listening culture. That's going to be absolutely imperative for you. Another thing is, can you have we talked about this, but bonuses, and that's part of you, again, thinking about that package, so perhaps you make it a little bit competitive, right? Not where it becomes competitive as such where it's negatively having an impact on your experience. But again, it's something that people actually like. They're enjoying it. They have an opportunity to win. They're feeling good about what they actually do. Think about your policies. What policies do you have in place or do you need to have in place to ensure that your part-time employees are supported and they understand what is truly expected of them? What type of training programs do you have? Are you taking the time to say that, hey, for you to work in this industry, work for our company, rather not the industry, work for our company part-time, you've got to go through an in-depth training program. And so perhaps that is, 6 weeks or, maybe that's 8 weeks or whatever it is. You have to determine what that is. But how do you ensure that they are truly set up for success and they really understand the brand, right? And what's expected and how you guys actually deliver. Do you have, I would say, mentors rather in place for them? Or I can't think of the other term that some organizations use. So maybe a buddy, so to speak, to ensure that whatever they're doing, that they're delivering and they're getting that feedback that's needed. And so I want you to think about a pilot program. Where can you actually pilot this? How can you ensure that you have diversity in your workforce, which can lead to fresh ideas and a different perspective and improved customer service, which ultimately enhances your brand's reputation. But you've got to have those parameters, so to speak, or principles in place. And you have to be able to really deliver on what it is that you're going to say and be adaptable. You got to be adaptable because that's really the key to your survival, especially in this, is you got to be able to embrace change. And it's not that it can't work. It absolutely can work. It can work in ways that you never even expected. But again, it's the setup, right? Not just the strategy, but it's the setup. How do you set it up? How do you have strategy, but also what is the culture? Because the culture is going to absolutely override the strategy. And so I want you to think about some of the things I've shared with you today to ensuring that's going to be in place for you. Now, I mentioned a pilot. I love pilots because you get to test, right, and see what works and what's not working. But be very careful about where you actually pilot this. If you have a number of different locations, think about where would be the best 1 or 2 places to pilot and who has strong leadership in those places to be able to give you the feedback and the data that you actually need. That's going to be key for you. So don't just, randomly say we're going to pilot this or we're going to roll this out slowly or whatever the case is, or we're going to God forbid, make this huge shift and change and you haven't tested it to see what works and what's not working. Get the feedback before you decide this is absolutely the way that we're going to go. And so I think that's going to be key. Set up listening sessions to get that feedback. But then again, you're thinking about what strategies can you implement to attract and retaining part-time employees, part-time talent that are committed to excellence in customer service. That's really your question, is what strategies do we need to have in place, or what tools and resources do we need to have in place to attract and retain our part-time talent, ensuring that they understand that we have a commitment to excellence in customer service. So what type of employees do you need to have that will readily say, I buy into that belief. It's something that I'm interested in, and they're willing to stay with you for a period of time. And so for that to happen, you may need to deliver a bonus. You may need to deliver something extra that you give them because you understand that they're also saving you money in some aspects, right? If you have part-time employees, then perhaps you're not necessarily giving them benefits, or maybe you say part-time employees are for your organization, or full-time employees are 30 hours or more per week. That may be a full-time benefit. And so you're thinking about that. Thinking about what does overtime actually look like, but I want you to give it some thought. Now, here's the thing. Once you implement this, I would love to hear, or you begin to talk about it with your leadership team, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this particular thing. I know that you mentioned in the narrative that you are for it, but the leadership team is not necessarily for that. Well, what data can you give them to support, and what robust conversations need to be had to be able to help them to warm up to the idea a little bit more? So are you building a strong business case? What are you putting in your business case to be able to have those conversations about what some other brands are actually doing that are similar to yours? And how does that actually work, right? So when you think about, I'll give an example of Lexus. I know that Lexus has some part-time employees working at their organization, and some of them are better than others. And so I'll I've had an experience even here recently where maybe perhaps you go to, we'll just say for one dealership here in Dallas, we have this, what is it called? Sewell. I drive a Sewell. I love those I drive a Sewell commercials, right? And so you have Sewell, and Sewell can deliver a completely different experience than another brand. Why is that? What makes it different? If it's all Lexus or all Mercedes or all BMW or all Jaguar, whatever the car is, right? What's different about a Sewell than another brand? Well, it's the experience. Why is the experience different? Maybe perhaps it's the leadership. Maybe it's perhaps, it's the benefits. I don't know, but that's something to dig into and see what are some other luxury brands doing and how are they actually making that work. Build your business case. Talk and think through as that when you're presenting that business case, your pilot, and how you would actually pilot that. How would you ensure that it's successful? And then what are the benefits? See, it's a difference between talking about something and discussing it and then showing them. I'm going to encourage and invite you to show them how it could work. They're talking about all the reasons why it couldn't, but I want you to begin to think about what are even the financial benefits of why it could work. And so don't just talk about, it could happen. Show them the potential. What is it going to do for them? What is it going to do for your stakeholders? What is it going to do for your bottom line? And then also address the risk, right? We can't go into it just saying, okay, this is what's going to happen, or this is what needs to happen. Acknowledge that there are going to be some risk. And again, how will you measure success? Another thing that I strongly encourage you to do is to think about your change management plan. What is it? What will it look like? And ensure that even with your change management plan that you have in place, remember, you're going to have some flexibility. You cannot just have a change management plan and think that, hey, we put this document together, we're going to implement this, and there are going to be no curveballs along the way. Remember, anything that could go wrong probably will go wrong. And that's not being negative. It's actually being realistic and planning for that. And so what can you actually do and address in your change management plan to be able to ensure that, again, your customers are not suffering? Now, I understand what you mentioned also in the narrative, that you are not focused on employees and your employee experience. But I'm going to, really say that for this to really work for your organization, you're going to have to really rethink your employee experience, because it's not just about the customers. If you don't have employees, you have no customers, right? So how do you have, who serves your customers? The way you serve them, and you serve them well, which is what I believe you want to do, is to serve them well. It's thinking through, how do I treat the employee? Because if I treat my employees well, then there's a good possibility they're going to treat my customers well. If I don't treat them well, are they as invested? Are they as committed? How do they actually show up? And will I open myself up to having a revolving door and also be extinct sooner rather than later? And again, you want to be able to capture those ideas. So it starts with your employees and thinking differently about who you hire, who you actually keep, who you reward, who you promote, and how we can actually make this successful. Now, if you would like my assistance and putting together your change management plan or your business case, or talking through it with you more, then I would love for you to send me an email at spayne, that's S as in Sam, P as in Patricia, AYNE, spayne at smpistrategies.com. And I will be more than happy to set up some time for us to connect and talk through how I can actually support you in your organization's transition, or keeping the current model that you have, and really even improving upon that. I'm Dr. Sherilyn Payne. I'll be here next Thursday with your Q&A. And again, feel free to send me a message. I'd love to answer your questions. Have a super fantastic week.